Hey guys, this video we're going to introduce the microeconomic reform topic of trade liberalization. Now before, in the 1970s, or up until the 1970s, Australia's government heavily protected local industries from imports and foreign competition. And that was done to protect our jobs here. And so what they did is they introduced import quotas, they introduced tariffs or taxes on imports, they introduced subsidies to help lower the production costs of these firms, and all that helped to minimize the competition between these firms and our international foreign competitors. And so that protected jobs, and that protected our living standards at that time. But now, as the world has become more globalized, and globalization is one of the major instigators of change, globalization being the spread of business and international trade across national borders. So globalization is the integration of foreign markets. So now, with the onset of globalization due to technological changes and this breakdown of geographical barriers through technology, so before it was very hard to travel from Australia to England because you had to take a boat. But now you can just take a flight and it'll only take 24 hours to get from Australia to England. Now globalization has made markets more accessible for people, and that's why this new microeconomic reform of trade liberalization has been introduced, so as to integrate foreign markets with our domestic market, so as to encourage efficiency, to encourage productivity, and to overall encourage increases to our aggregate supply. So what are the measures that the government has taken in order to liberalize, to make freer our trade? So we're going to look at a few measures that at the beginning of the 1970s, the Australian government introduced. So these introductions of cuts in tariffs, so cutting the tax on imports, cutting tariffs, reducing the amount of subsidies, abolishing quotas, so not putting up a number as to how much we can import, and the increase of free trade agreements, of bilateral or multilateral free trade agreements. And we're going to look at all four of these different initiatives made by the government in further lectures. But now, just note that trade liberalization is when the government cuts tariffs, reduces subsidies, abolishes import quotas, and increases the number of bilateral or multilateral free trade agreements between us and our trading partners, and also scaling back other protective devices, have all contributed to trade liberalization. So with trade liberalization, we are actually exposed to the foreign market, and what this means is that we have to, so the effects of trade liberalization are that we have to reallocate our resources to our most productive uses. So we have to reallocate these resources to areas where we have the comparative advantage, or the fewest or the least opportunity cost foregone. So the most productive areas of production. And secondly, it has forced firms to increase efficiency in order to compete or to survive. So if they weren't to improve their efficiency, then they would be left behind, because we have the option now to purchase overseas goods, which are, in theory, very, very close substitutes to the goods that we have here at a very much cheaper cost. And so that encourages firms to cut their costs and to operate with greater efficiency so that they may be internationally competitive. And this is very good for the economy because over time we will find areas of production where we are most internationally competitive, and therefore other areas that we remain uncompetitive in, they would eventually struggle to survive and die off. And although that may cause structural unemployment in the very short term, in the long term, in the medium to long term, other jobs in areas where we are comparatively advantaged would increase as we trade more with overseas countries, and as a result, our welfare or our total overall economic welfare will benefit. And we're going to look at how our welfare is a lot better off having this trade liberalization macroeconomic reform in place than if we were to be a closed economy in our next lecture on trade liberalization and its welfare impacts. But to recap this lecture, trade liberalization has occurred due to this idea, or this concept of globalization, where foreign markets have become integrated across national borders as if there is only one large market. And to encourage trade between nations, the government has cut tariffs, reduced subsidies, abolished import quotas, and finally increased the number of bilateral or multilateral free trade agreements between trading partners. And the effect of trade liberalization is to reallocate resources to the most productive areas of use, and so as a result increase our efficiency in production so as to maximize our living standards and to minimize the opportunity costs at which we're using our resources.